Okay, so the Switch 2 is a system that exists. Yeah, controversial statement we got here, but with the system, we've got the introduction of the Nintendo Switch 2 editions, being a completely revolutionary, never before heard of idea of performance upgrades through purchases, or free updates for no reason. So today, I'm essentially gonna waste the time of everybody to review the Switch 2 edition of Pokemon Legends ZA, despite all the deets just simply being visible on the store page to see if it's even worth your $10, alongside a review of Scarlet and Violet's Rise from Ashes through version 4's reincarnation of the game, alongside some quick cliff notes for minor changes to the other Pokemon games that we've previously covered in terms of their new hardware benefits. So without further ado, let's pretend to care about changes that your eyes might not even notice. Before even pulling the trigger on the Switch 2 edition of Legends ZA, allow us first to just shove the game into the system and see what the hardware provides. Unfortunately, the Switch 2 edition holds many of your hardware upgrades behind a paywall, meaning no, you're not allowed to have an upped frame rate or a proper resolution update. Well, what does that even leave us with? Load times, and they're pretty noticeable too. With fast travel first, the time between the two systems are essentially cut in half. On Switch 1, they'd be pretty lengthy, usually averaging around 8 seconds in length, sometimes a wee bit more, which is obviously going scorched earth on more of your time, which funnily enough allows you to see the loading screens long enough to actually read them. On Switch 2, however, our fast travel load screens essentially get gutted like fish, as now they average 4 seconds in length, obviously allowing you to play the game again sooner, which is fantastic. Unfortunately, those loading screens are less egregious in general gameplay, since what I personally really care about more is the transitions between day and night, because of how in the way they are when you try to do just about anything on the streets. With day to night first, on Switch 1, we average somewhere around 23 seconds of twiddling your thumbs before getting control of your character again. On Switch 2, however, our average comes somewhere around 19 seconds, again giving you roughly 4 seconds of your life back every single time. Night to day can vary on the other hand, skipping around without money earned saves roughly 2 to 3 seconds, and with rewards, it seems to be about 4. Yes, all of this gamers, just to say that you're basically saving 4 seconds on every load screen related to time changes and fast travel. You know, the stuff that actually matters, which is a pretty small but nice bonus. Although it shouldn't be a shock that once you torch your $10 on the upgrade pack, that you'll finally be able to access the rest of your hardware upgrade. What we gain here with this purchase consists of both frame rate and resolution. With frame rate first, this enhancement is basically impossible to miss. From the steady 30 the Switch 1 ran at, doubling things straight to 60 is just night and day on your eyes. Meaning not only does the game look and run smoother, but because we're playing a real-time game rather than a turn-based one, technically this even brings a pay-to-win component to the game, as a higher frame rate allows for you, the player, to react to things even easier as they happen in-game, as more information is being fed to you. Unfortunately, in normal play, it's not going to be too impactful since the AI, like you, will just be participating in a button mashing contest. More use can definitely be found in the Rogue Mega Battles since their AI plays slower, which is easier to play into, but the pay-to-win aspect is in multiplayer, since Switch 2 players will quite literally have an advantage over the Switch 1 player base, as the frame advantage and the resolution bump too makes your ability to play slow and react to foes easier, leading you to play better in theory, serving as a potential gameplay improver, not just one for looking nicer. Although if we wanted looking nicer, the game's resolution increase certainly tries to help, as the Switch 2 edition now displays at 1080p on handheld while hitting 4K when docked. For those who don't know what that gibberish even means, it means it displays gooder. And for Zoomers who don't understand that, I ask, have you tried looking at the quality settings on a YouTube video before? Usually just making textures more crispy, while also allowing more to be seen at times. Although here, unlike games we'll see later, it's a native improvement rather than an upscaled one, which just leads the game as a whole to look better, without the fear of blurry visuals. Although it kinda does go wasted, like dude, it's Legend ZA. You're not fixing the many bad looking textures littered throughout the game, you're just presenting them less poorly. That's even if you notice the game looking prettier at all. Like as someone who was barely even looking for better visuals, it felt a bit unnoticeable. But of course I'm sure someone with 600 hours would probably notice better visuals at first sight. You know, or if someone actually supplied them with an actual side-by-side look. Yeah, that would probably help. But that's really it. You You spend $10 to get a better visual experience through both the presentation, but more importantly, the frame rate. The gameplay impact is minimal, but does exist. But sadly, there is no new or modified content here to speak of, meaning there is a big lack of an it factor to purchase the upgrade pack in the first place. It just leaves the entire purchase just feeling empty in value, as there's not much to show for it as one would like, which finally means we can depart Legends EA and move on to the game that actually needed an upgrade. As far as the Switch 2 goes, Scarlet and Violet are the biggest winners on the entire console, as unlike the ZA upgrade that actually costs extra money to use the new hardware benefits, here it's free courtesy of version 4.0. And here, the new frame rate is jaw-dropping considering the life support this game was running on Switch 1. 30 FPS and frame drops out the wazoo. Here, it's just gone. Now keeping the game steady at 60 FPS, basically always making the game just look unholy amounts of cursed, since it actually runs like a finished product, retconning the years you've spent with the game before. But it's not just the frame rate that's making the game more playable, as loading times are very noticeable in how much they've improved. Gamers, get this! Fast travel actually lives up to the name now. Loading times from flying on Switch 1 were very undesirable for their ability to hit double-digit load times in seconds, and when traveling in or out to different maps would reach up to 20s of seconds. Your time would essentially have an atomic bomb strapped to it and be detonated anytime you try to fast travel. On Switch 2 now, no matter where you're going, the seconds spent loading can be counted out on a single hand, finally beating the Sonic 06 time-wasting allegations. But the good ending doesn't even actually stop there, as the PC now loads mods instantaneously rather than suffering obnoxious delays that stop you from finding the Pokemon you're looking for. In fact, the Pokédex now also loads its Pokemon properly too, allowing you to just hold right, again, making the finding of a Mon easier. Now, if all of this didn't already have you drooling about the game graduating from its beta releases, how about the gameplay enhancements? While version 4.0 did bring a couple of extra bonuses, like some more camera settings and the ability to lock the minimap in place, those are also on Switch 1. I'm talking the real changes, like the massively increased draw distance that lets Pokemon stay loaded in from a much greater range, hopefully now keeping something you're trying to find from appearing and instantly disappearing, basically meaning you always have reaction time when something spawns now. Finding said mons is significantly easier because our $500 paywall actually increases the amount of spawns that can be active at a time. 16 measly encounters at once. Try 20 more. 36 active spawns at once is nuts, saving you so much more time in trying to track down whatever kind of Pokemon you're looking for. Unfortunately, this does have one fatal issue that can arise. Yeah, if you thought it was common on Switch 1 to run from a Mon and then instantly be thrown into another one on loop, now I simply ask you to imagine what more spawns can do and how much more frequently these headaches can occur. That, gamers and gamettes, is what the Switch 2 brings Scarlet and Violet players. Basically what you get is much more wild Pokemon, vastly faster load times, another resolution bump hardly worth mentioning, and finally a frame rate that finally gives you the next gen experience that you paid for, despite the game looking like that, again with no extra cost, essentially pissing all over the grave of Legends EA. Unfortunately, the rest of the games we have here don't win big fancy new frame rates or massive overhauls. No, here we've got various forms of the system's stronger processor, making life a wee bit better. From our collection of previously talked about games of Pokemon Sword and Shield, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, Legends Arceus, Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, Mystery Dungeon DX, and despite not being Pokemon, Paper Mario The Thousand Year Doors remake, these are what we have, and only one truly stands out in terms of the hardware bump. That is actually the tree game. Sword and Shield specifically scavenges all of the little things we'll see here in a noticeable supply. As far as load times go, the other 5 games may see microscopic improvements, although unlike Sword and Shield, the impact is going to be far less noticeable. In BDSP's case, having its abysmal startup time trimmed down a bit makes anyone stuck shiny hunting Darkrai for 8 months suffer just a bit less. Otherwise, all we're really going to see with impact here is Sword and Shield. With fast travel first, it's basically instantaneous. It's so fast fast now that the Corviknight loading screen sometimes never even appears. And when it comes to battles, starting them up is just a bit faster across the board too. Like, just look at the side by side. The lack of a delay is just beautiful. And that's not yet the icing on the cake, as now the game lag, usually seen in Sword and Shield's Wild area, Sword and Shield's DLC areas, or Legends Arceus' open world, have basically been taken out back, followed by a shovel to the head, making those open areas much more playable when the frame rate isn't dipping. Although with these positives, the word unfortunate has to come out and stink everything up. As the system screen provides a new resolution, to match it, the system tries to upscale the games being played. On handheld, this has the potential to make the games look a bit blurry at times. With all the praise I've given Sword and Shield thus far, it's unfortunately the biggest offender here, and something like Mystery Dungeon DX isn't quite immune either. But, the newly implemented Switch 2 boost feature for Switch 1 games kinda allows you to bypass this issue entirely when playing in handheld, since it can now present the docked visuals instead. So now only one game really suffers from blurry visuals on handheld, which, whether or not Let's Go is actually sentenced to remain in this limbo forever is yet to be seen. But let's be real, this is a game you should probably never play on handheld anyways. All of this, gamers, is the grab bag of performance enhancements littered throughout many of the Switch 1 games, without dedicated Switch 2 versions. Some games got nothing of real note, some play smoother now, and others are Sword and Shield. All I know is between all the many instances in which the Switch 2 would better the game, loading times that would be cut out, but aren't due to playing the game on a cartridge rather than a digital download, along so many more other inconsistencies, unfortunately makes this list nowhere near as complete as I would like. And that's the shame here, especially when there wasn't too much to say about the games mentioned in this section. So, for a recap, the Pokemon Legends ZA Switch 2 Edition upgrade is completely negligible. For $10, you're basically just given a substantially higher frame rate on a game that hardly needs it, as the Switch 1 version was very consistent at keeping its 30 FPS intact. Not to mention that Pokemon's not really a game that you'll need perfect button timing in battle for. Like, yes, ZA is undoubtedly the most in need of it thanks to being played in real time rather than turns. But when the default game plan is just button mashing, outside of online play, the gameplay impact won't be felt too much. Like, come on, man, it's not a Mario RPG. Precision usually isn't needed. But if you already have the Switch 2 version, maybe it's your favorite game, or if money grows on trees for you, like, sure, man, it's whatever. It's an obvious improvement. It's just an unneeded one. Thankfully, the upgrade for Scarlet and Violet is free and a notable step up for the game. With massive one-ups in terms of load times and frame rate, the game truly feels like it's out of the alpha. No, pre-alpha playtesting stage, the Switch 1 put it through, and the extra spawns are just the added cherry on top. If you've already got the system, it might just be worth running the game again, especially if your actual complaints with the game wasn't the actual gameplay components. And as for the rest, negligible but appreciated pluses in the rare instances they appear in. Not to mention the many other games that we didn't even touch on in this video. If you're asking if you should buy a Switch 2 to get these bonuses though, no, absolutely not. What the hell is wrong with you? Minor upgrades like this should never be your reasoning for wanting a system, unless you're a speedrunner or some other form of content creator. Look, if you want the system, just get it. That's reason enough. If you wanted an actual reason to get the system, just simply waiting for your system seller Switch 2 exclusive game to release should just be enough. Maybe it's a new Smash Bros, new 3D Zelda, or maybe even Winds and Waves should it be system locked. Like, things aren't this complicated, guys. Regardless, this has been our dive into the world of Switch 2 editions with Legends ZA. Thank you for watching, and until next time, I am still utterly pissed. Imagine my frustration of torching funds intended to buy peak fiction, instead going towards what basically counts as a filler video and a DLC that 2 months later, I still don't even want to touch from the dread ZA's base game haunts me with. Listen, as long as y'all view this video and the Legends ZA DLC video as useful, at that point the cost is worth.